Blog Talk Radio.
Live from the nation's capital, it's Quintessential Listening, Poetry, with host Dr. Michael Anthony Ingram.
The free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream to the current's end and dips its wing in the orange sun rays and dares to claim the sky. But a bird that stalks down his narrow cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The cage bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the cage bird sings of freedom. The free bird thinks of another breeze, and the trade winds salt through the sighing trees, and the fat worms waiting on the dawn bright lawn, and his name is in the sky. But a cage bird stands on the grave of dreams. His shadow shouts on a nightmare scream. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The cage bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and tune is heard on distant hill, for the cage bird sings of freedom. Good evening, everyone. My name is Michael Anthony Ingram. I'd like to welcome you to Quintessential Listening, Poetry. A very special guest tonight is Mr. Jerry Brunoe. He's a native of Warm Springs, I believe, and he attended Oregon University. I met Jerry some years ago. He's a fantastic poet, and I'm glad that he's here with us. Jerry, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you for sharing that poem and my information.
Okay, great. So what we'd like to do is to get started. So begin by sharing some poetry with us.
Yeah, so similar to what you did with the cage bird sings, I get inspired by other poets and I imitate them. And so this one is love poem number 49, No Willy Willy Bay, and it's for Walt Whitman. And it's based off his line, what is it then between us? What is it then between us? The ocean shores and the ocean, the rolling waves tolling the word, come. And days later, crashing on the sandy beaches, here. What was it that sounded love? Just after the waves swept back the shore. 3 times I sang the body love. I sing it sad. I sing it blues. I sing it with a coarse voice that scratched my lover's tongue and scraped her areola thin. 3 times I felt my ribs ache with each extended vowel. How many cascading mountains divided my song, and did it ever reach you?
And the title of that piece?
The title is Love Poem 49, No Willy Willy Bay.
Why did you write it? What about him? What about that particular line led you to write that piece?
So I received a letter from a friend, and it was kind of a breakup letter, and in it was the phrase, what is it then between us? And it made me respond in poem, and within an imitation of Walt Whitman, to bring that out and kind of respond to that letter via poem.
Do you enjoy writing in general? It does make sense. Do you enjoy writing in general?
I do enjoy writing. I try to write daily. My style is a bit hard to do that. I followed Wallace Stevens in a sense where he wrote most of his poems in his head, would spend days just kind of composing them. And then after days of doing that and said, he'd sit down, and one of the phrases that I learned was, if that line is good, if that poem is good, you'll remember it when you finally sit down to write it. And I've kind of followed that. So they don't have to do it daily, but somewhere between anytime up to 4 or 5 times a week, up to down to like once a week, kind of depending on how long it takes me to compose it in my head.
What inspires you, Jerry?
Everything. So like, I mean, there's a bunch of, how do I put it, contemporary things going on in the world that inspire me to write, or even inspire me to action to do something with my community or communities. The biggest thing is other poets really tend to bring something out with their musicality within their words, how their cadence and rhythm and their use of alliteration will really draw out a song within their poems.
Well, will you favor us again?
Sorry, what was that?
Would you favor us again with another piece of poetry?
Yeah, of course. Love poem number 53, Home and Roads. It's for Agha Shahid Ali. She speaks my name like it's an aging home, old as patience, like home waiting for home. I didn't mean to walk away stumbling with my only intent, forgetting home. If I can drive back without needing sleep, I tend to call those places close to home. Hallelujah and saying grace are two different things. Both feels like a phone call home. If on the corner of love and desire, homeless and heartbroken, would you call that home? My language of loss has no ear to hear, no mouth to tongue the words, come, back, and home. Something, someone, somewhere back in Warm Springs has a tendency of calling me home. Part 2. I have loved enough to call something home. Rivers, lakes, forests, and the graveled road. The homeless should be nighttime cab drivers with their innate knowledge of city road. Afternoon confection, each windy gust redefines these dusty roads. Who shouts out with a throat full of longing, where are you, Jerry, and walking which road? And that's the end of that one.
All right. In your piece, you mentioned Warm Springs, and you mentioned home. Tell me about home. Tell me about home. What is home like?
So it's a very beautiful small town. Just about everybody knows everybody type of vibe. I would say 99.9% of the population is Native American with 3 tribes. Paiute, Warm Springs, and Wasco. I'm the latter. I'm Wasco. And we all kind of have that small time life. We go to work, go back home. We celebrate our culture with first food feasts, powwows, and medicine scene. I spend a lot of time in the outdoors here, hiking, fishing, hunting, camping, gathering roots and berries.
So that particular piece is based on home. What the word home itself, that just continued to resonate with me. Talk a little bit more about home.
Okay. Let's see. We struggle financially or economically as a nation or a small town, if you will. As a government, we can't find a way to provide for a majority of our population. A majority of us are unemployed. I think the rate was 25% employed, and that's for 3/4 of the year. And we have seasonal employment for the summer shoot up to 75%. So, I mean, if you compare it to most other towns in the United States, things go really, really bad when it's 75% employment. When it goes under 90% unemployed rate, so you got 10% unemployed, like things go to hell in a handbasket anywhere else in the U.S., but somehow we manage to persevere, survive, and thrive in a very small environment of, what did I say, it was 25% unemployment rate at times. So, yeah.
Did the environment shape your writing?
Sorry, what kind? Does it shape my writing?
Yes.
So I would say it does. I mean, there's a lot of specialized language that I use within my poems. I use 2 of the native languages here on the reservation with my poems quite often. I use both Sahaptin and Kikst. Sahaptin is Warm Springs and Kikst is Wasco. Then there's the other specialized languages in terms of the variations in how we name animals. So we use both the native languages and the native names for some animals, but we also have different names for them in English, in a sense. So salmon isn't always salmon. Sometimes it's blueback salmon, so on and so forth. It kind of just depends on all of that.
So what we'll do, Jerry, is take a quick break, and we'll be back with you and more of your work.
Thank you very much.
Right. Good evening again. My name is Michael Anthony Ingram. I'd like to welcome you to Quintessential Poetry Listening. The call-in number is 646-787-1631. We're here with our very special guest, Mr. Jerry Brunoe, and he'll continue with this journey of sharing his work. Thank you, Jerry.
Of course. Just give me one second while I bring up the next poem. It's love poem number 68, Amos, the Abacadarian, and it's for Leah Wellborn. Amos possessed pizzazz, bottled it with decay, called it the varied axe, dogged hell, and the calm caw. Everyone loved his improv, for even Ubuntu gained such a laugh through that. Hell, that made him Amos. I loved her and never jested his lips, his antique and ready to clip. Love, an ageless voodoo, meant for a patient man. Now is that his secret dream, or the joke taking its toll, patiently taking down the body's clock? Culture, the Golden Taj, reader jokes by Muhammad Ali. Say, isn't this where we all laugh, taken back by his oral jig, useless in each of us the goof? Veiled from your only love, weep with old remorse and xerophthalmic. Yes, the heartbeats ebb. Zion is what he was, our hope from diaspora.
Would you recite that piece again, please? That was beautiful.
The entire piece, or what part?
The entire piece.
Sure. Amos, the Abacadarian. Amos possessed pizzazz, bottled it with decay, called it the varied axe, dogged hell, and the calm caw. Everyone loved his improv, for even Ubuntu gained such a laugh through that. Hell, that made him Amos. I loved her and never jested his lips, his antique, kempt and ready to clip. Love and ageless voodoo meant for a patient man. Now is that a secret dream or the joke taking its toll, patiently ticking down the body's clock? Culture, the Golden Taj, read her jokes by Muhammad Ali. Say, isn't this where we all laugh, taken back by his oral jig, useless and each of us the goof? Veiled from your only love, weep with old remorse and xerophomic. Yes, the heartbeat said, Zion is what he was, our hope from diaspora.
Let me ask this question. When you write your pieces of poetry, when do you know that the piece is done? Or is it ever done?
So this particular piece, that question is really easy to answer because it's a double abecedarian, and it's a form where the first letter of the first word of each line is the alphabet. So the first letter of the first line is an A. The first letter of the second line is a B, all the way down to Z. What makes it a double abecedarian is on the first line, the last letter is a Z. And the rest of it corresponds. So if the first letter is a B of the line, the last letter is a Y. And so that really dictated how I wrote that poem, and it gave a very playful, whimsical, or even improvisational feel to it as I wrote it. Even though I did get a very linear narration in there, there was still a lot of playfulness in it. That's the way most people read it.
It was beautiful.
And in terms of, I'm glad you liked it. In terms of the other poems, a lot of it has to do with my ability to edit. The older I get and the more I read and the more I write, the more I can see where a line needs an adjustment, maybe a new word here or there. And as soon as I reach that point of my current ability to edit, I know it's finished. I can no longer provide that poem. I can no longer breathe life into it. It is now finished. It's now composed, and I start sharing it with the world.
So when you share your poetry with the world, what do you think, or what do you expect them to think? Or if you expect them to think anything?
90% of the writing is for myself. And when I share it, some of the poems I'm hoping they can relate to it. I hope it sometimes inspires them. I hope it sometimes helps them get out of a funk or deal with a situation. And other times I hope it just gives them that feeling of Zen or even a Nirvana-like feeling as they're finished feeling, where, as Emily Dixon wrote, top off the top of their head type of feeling like, okay, that piece is good, I'm glad it's there. And they just sit in silence for a bit and then can move on.
The ability to sit and smile for a bit can be very difficult at times. Are your poems relatively happy pieces, or they're spread out?
I would say the way I'm writing it, so I have one book, and I would say a third of it is not happy at all. And the other 2/3 kind of depends on the reader and what they can take from it. I'm working on a second book. I'm 10 poems into it now, and it's very pastoral, meaning I write about the rural life I live in, nature and things like that. So they would only get an emotion from it if they had a similar situation with that animal that I'm writing about or that landscape. Then they could take away that same emotion as well.
What is the title of your first book?
I kind of go back and forth between 3 titles. So one title is Smaller Towns, and that's kind of like my homage to Richard Hugo. And then another title is Smaller Nouns, so play on word town and noun, and that's an homage to both Wallace Stevens and Richard Hugo.
Is your book published?
No, I did get an offer today, literally about, I want to say 2.5 hours ago. And So I'm kind of debating on if I want to go through that next step. I've turned 2 offers down so far, and I just want to make sure everything is right with me. But I mean, like, I'm very excited, very happy that someone thought it was worthwhile, and I'll definitely contact them with a lot of positive attitude and positive reply, and thank them and see where we can go from here and work on that.
Congratulations, Jerry. We'll be right back,
Thank you.
everyone. We are back. My name is Michael Anthony Ingram. This is Quintessential Listening Poetry with our very special guest, Mr. Jerry Brunoe. Jerry, it's your turn again. Please share.
Of course. This one's love poem number 31, Letter to Komanyaka from Nescowen, and it's for Richard Hugo. Dear Yusef, I need you here now like I always needed her. I am near the low tide's foaming call. Here, the sand crawls faster than its shore, the seagulls in the distance squalling in their dancing grace. Some of their cries are high, some low, and a handful are off-key like the locals' nightlife. Last night I practiced pacing the tide's eventual crash and infinite go, until not even the Nescoen, who claimed to be the loneliest person along the Oregon coast, could tell the difference between me or the waves. If you were here too, you would think she was by her side, singing Simone like Nina, crying, not over, but for me. I need you here to say, only a high school drummer tries to imitate oceanic rhythms. Stop. It helped when I was younger and the green hill backdrop of the landscape was engulfed by a growing fog. But that was years ago, Yusef, and I'm a different Genghis than Hugo ever meant to be. I have been debating with myself over the color of gravel and how the various breakdowns paint them differently. Some mornings I wake up anxious, and there are wildfires burning in a vampiric red, as though the space between the individual rocks is cut and bleeding the road dead. Midday, of all my panic-stricken moments where the road itself is a golden hue, riddled with dew. If I am ever to have a stretch of insomnia that doesn't seem purposeless, beyond letting me witness one day greet another, I hope to witness the blueback salmon rise from its grave on a solemn road. Take care. I am spending my most recent moments polishing the finishing touches on my last essay. Tall steps, real Oregonians must take, and accepting the color of gravel is not gray. Jerry.
Your work is incredible, Jerry.
I'm glad you think so, sir.
Well, I do think so, and I hope the listening audience thinks so as well. Can you share another one with us?
Yeah, of course. Just give me a second to scroll down.
Okay. Would you like me to share one as you're scrolling?
Yeah, that'd be perfect.
Okay. All right, then. This piece is by Edwin Brock, and the title is 5 Ways to Kill a Man. There are many cumbersome ways to kill a man. You can make him carry a plank of wood to the top of a hill and nail him to it. To do this properly, you require a crowd of people wearing sandals, a cock that crows, a cloak to dissect, a sponge, some vinegar, and one man to hammer the nails home. Or you can take a length of steel, shaped and chased in traditional way, and attempt to pierce the metal cage he wears. But for this, you need white horses, English trees, men with bows and arrows, at least 2 flags, a prince, and a castle to hold your banquet in. Dispensing with nobility, you may, if the wind allows, blow gas at him. But then you need a mile of mud sliced through with ditches, not to mention black boots, bomb craters, more mud, a plague of rats, a dozen songs, and some sound hats made of steel. In the age of aeroplanes, you may fly miles above your victim and dispose of him by pressing one small switch. All you then require is an ocean to separate you, 2 systems of government, a nation's scientists, several factories, a psychopath, and land that no one needs for several years. These are, as I began, cumbersome ways to kill a man. Simpler, direct, and much more needed to see that he is living somewhere in the middle of the 20th century and leave him there. That was Edwin Brock. All right.
Thank you.
Are you ready? Are you ready?
Yeah. I am ready.
Who's favorite?
Love poem number 46, The Substitute Platypus, for Wallace Stevens. He is the reclusive prince of a darkened compromise. What Finn said, it must carry the beaver tail like a sin, and counterbalance the weight through his body with a bill. He is the reclusive prince of a darkened compromise. Small web feet, blacker than his body, clumsy like a child. Thank God they didn't make him keep the beaver teeth. He is the reclusive prince of a darkened compromise. His horizon failed him as Allah's sails first appeared, but his soul had no wings to fly southward for the winter.
That very last line. Would you repeat it?
Yeah, but his soul had no wings to fly southward for the winter.
Tell me about that line. Why that line? Why did that conclude that particular piece of poetry?
So I was responding to, how would I put it, a feeling where I wasn't welcomed at the time in my workplace and things of that nature, and I didn't have the time or the ability at that time to leave to a better job or anything of that nature. So I just used the biology of a platypus and all is different in his anatomy to describe how I felt. And I had no wings to fly, quote, southward for the winter, leave for something better and be a bit happier working somewhere else.
So it sounds like Maya Angelou's piece, in terms of the caged bird, you sounded as if your wings had been clipped.
Correct. Like that's kind of how it felt at the time when I was working there.
What does poetry allow you to do emotionally?
I would say it allows me to understand how I truly felt about a situation. It gives me time to not necessarily get a 360-degree view of it, but a much larger view than how I originally experienced it. I'm able to prod at it from different angles and kind of go through it and then come out with a poem of how it all happened or how it worked out for me.
Does spirituality play a role in your pieces?
There is some pieces that do. I would say, if not intertwined or married to spirituality, it's definitely parallel to it, at least.
You have another one?
Yeah, sure. Love poem number 101, Pilgrimage, Cascade Range, Warm Springs Reservation, for Natasha Trethaway. Here, our ancestors ascended as only the oppressed can ascend. From the sicknesses we now call typhoid, smallpox, and reservation. Here, you will find their camps scattered and abandoned, but somehow kept. There is no intrusion of underbrush. The limbs have yet to litter, as if the forest beckons us back into the old Kachaya camp to find a rusted kettle near the stream. The blue and huckleberry bushes mingle at the edges of meadows and beneath the trees. Here, when I come here, pilgrimage, I do not speak, but keep each part for listening. And give me 1 second. The computer froze and it visually blocked me out. I'll go back a couple lines. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, not a problem. Not a problem. You can share it again if you like.
Okay. Yeah, I'll definitely go back a few lines.
All right. When you write it, in the meantime, when you write, do you write at night, in the morning? What is the best time to write?
So for me, it's usually at the end of the day. I've accomplished everything else that needs to get done in terms of existing day to day. I got my grocery shopping done. I got my other errands done. I got my household chores like dishes and laundry done. And I spent the day during my free time to compose in my head so I can sit down at that time and then try and move forward after that.
Do you start with, when you're composing in your head, do you start with just one line, or is it primarily the whole entire vision of what you think the poem should be?
I start with one line and I slowly get the whole poem composed, or nearly the whole poem. And like I would have spent one time 3 weeks working on the opening line of a poem, and it went from an if-then statement to when-then statement, and so on and so forth, until I could finally complete it all. The computer unfroze, and I can continue if you'd like.
Oh, yes, please.
Yeah, so here, when I come here, pilgrimage, I do not speak, but keep each part for listening. I have come to memorize the way a lover's heart memorizes a lover's beat, the crooked paths that go unnoticed by Pacific Crest trail hikers, the rocks covered in moss and orange petroglyphs, and the spruce that has withered down to a gray pole and marks our border. Now, this is where my 2 feet straddle, divided by home and what is no longer ours. The wild animals on the run acclimate to a single man.
Who inspires you?
So, poetry-wise, anybody that I mentioned, so like each of these have been love poems so far, and
yes,
they have all kind of done that. You have definitely, if not inspired, you have informed my writing, especially in terms of the spoken word part of it and the performance, and any time I'm in front of a crowd, how I use inflection, tone, my body language. And there's a lot of other poets out there that in their own writing have gone on to say some of the same things. Henri Baraka did quite a bit of that with Charles Olson and the Black Mountain Poets in terms of the breath line. And Henri Baraka, he had a way of using his cadence and alliteration to draw out words and the sound to make the musicality of it. There's other poets like Denis Levertov who considers each line a poem a way of musical composition. So the end of a line is like a half-note pause, a period, or any other form of function like that, trips, exclamation point, question mark. There's a full note. The comma could be a quarter note depending on the usage of that comma. and so on and so forth to help you deliver that poem to the audience or for the reader to see it on the page and to know how to read it. Has definitely inspired me and informed how to write.
Did you study poetry in the traditional sense?
Sorry, what did you ask?
Did you study poetry, as in take classes?
So yeah, I did a bunch of classes undergrad, all the way up through the 400 level, and then I spent a lot of time reading various ars poeticas by different poets. It's Always Night by Yusuf Komunyaka is one of them. Triggering Town is Richard Hugo's version of it. Stanley Kunis had one. Forget the full title of it, but it's a century in the garden, just talking about him being 100 years old and how gardening helped him with life and poetry, things of that nature. And in terms of studying the forms, studying people's personal approaches to poetry.
Because you're quite talented, Jerry, and your work is so intricate.
I definitely try to keep it layered in terms of the reader. The foreword or the poet's note on my book, I mentioned Joseph Campbell, who is the top of the people who study the journey of the hero within literature throughout the world in terms of, be it a movie or a novel, short stories, any sort of mythological legends that we have throughout our tribal past. And he said something like, don't ever pay attention to the New York Times bestseller list. Just find a single writer who you really love. Read his work, read all of it, and then find out what he or she read and read all of those books as well. And from then on, you will have a point of view. And I'm kind of doing the same thing. I'm telling you each of these love poems is for certain poets. And in my own way, I'm telling you, you really shouldn't be reading me. You should be reading William Crossland. You should be reading Wallace Stevens. You should be reading Yusuf Komunyaka, Amari Baraka, and so on. You should be reading these poets. Like, you should see what they're doing. It's my way of paying homage to the past and how it's informed my own writing.
Very nice. What we'll do is take a quick break, and we'll be right back with Jerry Brunoe. We are back. My name is Michael Anthony Ingram. I'm here with Jerry Brunoe. The call-in number is 646-787-1631. It's a very special evening, and Jerry, I'd like to recite another piece, if that's okay.
Sure, yeah, definitely.
Oh, thanks. This is titled, I Can See the Tops of Trees. I can see the tops of trees, but I can't reach them. Lord knows I've tried to reach the tops of trees in my mind, in my life, in my time. Yet every time I scale the heights of an old oak tree in order to reach the branch of the highest tree and touch the greenest leaf, reality gently but assuredly pushes me back down to the ground. And there I'm again looking up at the tops of trees in my mind, in my life, in my time. I can see the peaks of mountains, but I can't reach them. Lord knows I've tried to reach the peaks of mountains in my mind, in my life, in my time. Yet every time I climb the cliffs of the craggiest mountain in order to taste the pureness of untainted snow, reality gently but confidently pushes me back down to the ground. And there I am again looking up at the peaks of mountains in my mind, in my life, in my time. I can see the crest of clouds, but I can't reach them. Lord knows I've tried to reach the crest of clouds in my mind, in my life, in my time. And every time I fold my arms in order to cradle a wisp of God's immaculate breath, reality gently but willfully pushes me back down to the ground. And there I'm again looking up at the crest of clouds in my mind, in my life, in my time. I can see the meridian of the sky, but I can't reach it. Lord knows I've tried to reach the meridian of the sky in my mind, in my life, in my time. Yet every time I stretch out my arms in order to seize a piece of Mount Olympus on high, reality gently but deliberately pushes me back down to the ground. And there I'm again looking up at the meridian of the sky in my mind, in my life, in my time. Reality, won't you stop pushing? And please, let me dream. Let me reach. Let me love. Just let me be. That was, I can see the tops of trees.
Okay.
Would you favor us with another poem, Gary?
Sure. Love poem number 28, Human Anatomy, for Robert Creeley. I learned my body was bisymmetrical before school. Each eyelid kissed after the tuck before good night.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me about that particular piece.
Okay. So, did you say read another one?
Yes.
Or did you ask a question?
I asked a question in terms of, tell me more about that particular piece. It was very short.
Yes, it was one of my earlier works. It was probably, I'm 35 now, it's probably 20 when I wrote that one. And I was reading very heavily at the time poets who were writing very short poems, including Robert Creeley. The other ones would have been Emily Dickinson, Langston Hughes. There's another poet at the time I was reading. They all wrote relatively short poems. Can't think of that poet's name at the time. But really informed how to write. It was very, very conclusive in terms of their structure. Like, you would understand right away by the title what they were writing about. And there would be a very quick succession of words or lines that would get you to the end, that would give you the piece you really wanted to learn on how it worked out. So I was saying, with Human Anatomy, I learned that my body was bisymmetrical before I entered any form of schooling, because my mother kissed both my eyes before I fell asleep. And so that's how I went through that one. Sorry, you're breaking up and I can't hear you.
Please share now. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Please share now.
Share another one?
Yeah.
Okay. I was talking about this one earlier where you asked about how I write. And I would have spent probably 3 weeks of my daily hike just working on the first line or two. And this one's called The Owl. When night comes, the owl does too. 3 hoots fill the air after I realize it's there. Its gray feathers sheen from the distant lamplight. One swoop from its perch, and it slips into the night.
Can you hear me?
Sorry, what was that, Michael? You there, sir? Hey, Michael, you there? Sorry, I can't hear at all. I don't want to interrupt you or anything of that nature. Wish I could make out what you were saying, and I would be able to go from there. We do have, from the looks of it, about 10 minutes left.